be reviewing the newest SUV within Mazda's lineup, a 2023 Mazda CX-50. Now, if you're a little confused by Mazda's naming scheme, let me explain it. Because the smallest SUV is the CX-30, then you have a CX-5, then you have a CX-50, then you have a CX-9. So you could see how it could be a little confusing. Some of the SUVs have a 0 behind it, some of them don't. And the CX-5 and the CX-50 are both being sold at the same time. So the CX-5 has not been discontinued. What are the differences? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly the differences between the CX-5 and the CX-50. And of course, tell you more about the CX-50, go for a drive, so you can decide if this is the right SUV for you. All right, let's get started. All right, I'm on the road. Let me tell you more about this brand new CX-50 and tell you about how it drives. First of all, let's talk about the differences between this CX-50 and the CX-5, because the two SUVs are very similar in so many ways. So you may be wondering why Mazda decided to come out with the 50 but not discontinue the 5. With the 50, you can tell Mazda really tried to make it look more masculine. So if you're looking on the outside, there's definitely a difference. Look at the CX-50's front end. You have a long hood, you have a very big middle grille that's even bigger with the CX-50. And then you could see the bottom of the grille actually sticks out from the nose like a couple inches, right? So it's more protruding in a way, and just seems like, yeah, it's a little bit more aggressive. Also, the way the headlights are shaped, they look a little bit bigger, the bumper looks more aggressive, and overall, the front end, to me, just looks more aggressive. And if you look at the side view of a CX-50, it's hard to tell, but a CX-50 is about 0.7 inches taller than a CX-5. So if you do plan on going outdoors, well, CX-50 is a little better suited for that. Now, besides the ground clearance, you can clearly see there's a lot of moldings around the wheel arches and underneath the door, right? Those matte cladding, there's a ton of it on purpose. Again, if you want to go outdoors, right, you don't have to worry about the paint being scratched as much, but you can definitely see it. They're big and thick, and you can't really miss it. One weird thing, though, I've noticed is when you open up the door, you'll see that the matte cladding forms like a handle underneath, a little lip underneath, and that folds underneath the car. But it's a trap for water and dirt and whatever, right? So just keep that in mind. You may have to clean a little bit more on the inside because of it. And if you go to the back, it's the same thing. The back just looks wider, like it's been stretched out, widened. So you have a bigger backside, you have a wider stance. And with this one that I'm driving, you do have dual chrome exhaust tips out back, right? You also have these covered fake vents on both sides. I'm not a fan of it. It does look kind of cheap, but I think Mazda just wanted to add a little bit more flair because it'd be really plain without it, I guess. But looking all around, definitely the CX-50 looks more aggressive, more masculine compared to a CX-5. Now, I did talk about also about the CX-50 being bigger. In fact, if you look at the dimensions, the CX-50 is around 5 inches longer than, actually almost 6 inches longer than a CX-5. And the wheelbase also has been stretched out. So because of it, you would think, well, the inside of a CX-5 should be significantly bigger, right? Well, no. That's the head scratcher part for the CX-50. The dimensions are bigger, so you would figure this is a bigger car, but the cabin inside got smaller. The passenger room on a CX-50 is actually 4 cubic feet smaller than a CX-5, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's a big head scratcher. Yes, you get a little bit more cargo room, but up front in the first row, second row actually got smaller. So where did all the inches go? Well, it does seem like, yes, the cargo room a little bit bigger and the front of the hood got stretched out more. But if you're looking for a more spacious SUV, the CX-5 is the one to look at rather than a 50. And that's really disappointing because the CX-5 is already among the smallest SUVs within the compact SUV segment. If you compare like a CX-5 to, say, a Honda CR-V, CR-V feels significantly bigger, right? And the CX-50, I thought when I first got in, would be bigger, but it's not. Since I already talked about cargo room, let's start out in the back. So when you open up the power tailgate, you do see that behind the second row, a good amount of cargo room. There's nothing wrong with it. There's little cubby holes on both sides and a spare tire underneath, so you don't have a lot of hidden storage. You can fold down the second row directly from the back, so that's good. And with the second row folded down, they fold down virtually flat and you expand your cargo room significantly, so that's fantastic. This CX-50 is among the upper trims. This is a turbo premium, so inside covered with beautiful leather. You have this dark caramel leather inside. Second row, very nice. I'm 5'10". Behind my driving position, I have about 2 inches of legroom and about 2 inches of headroom. So isn't the most spacious in the second row for adults, but isn't all that bad either. However, just for comparison, recently I reviewed the brand new Honda HR-V, which is supposed to be a subcompact SUV, and that one felt like it had just as much room as this one, which is why I've said the CX-50 being smaller than CX-5 is a big disappointment, because in terms of size, they're coming in way smaller than their peers. In the second row, you don't get much. Pair of vents, USB ports, and in this one, Turbo Premium, you get heated seats. That's about it. There's not a whole lot else back there. But I will say the seats are supportive. They're a little bit on the stiffer side, but overall, pretty comfortable. Now, moving up front, the seats are very different. They are still comfortable, but they're very, very sporty. So you're sitting into the seat for sure. When you get in, it's not like you're sitting on top of a very comfortable cushion. You're sitting in the cushion. The bolsters, the thigh bolsters are hugging you. The back bolsters are hugging you, right? So it definitely feels more like a sports seat. So in terms of comfort, if you're looking at some of the other SUVs within this segment, I would say a whole lot of them feel more comfortable. But if you're looking for more of a sporty SUV that you can tackle the corners faster with, then this is probably it, because the seats will definitely hold you in. They're not uncomfortable, but they're just more aggressive and a little bit more stiff. Now, as for the powertrain, did not change with this CX-50. It's the same powertrain as the CX-5, and you also see this powertrain in a lot of other Mazdas out there. So you can choose between a natural aspirated 4-cylinder or turbocharged 4-cylinder. The turbocharged one, that's in this tester car that I'm driving today, produces over 250 horsepower and over 300 pound-feet of torque. This is a good engine. I have driven it before. It's a very powerful engine, and with the CX-50, because of this platform, you could tow more than a CX-5. So that's another major difference. This car can tow up to 3,500 pounds versus the CX-5, 2,000 pounds. So if you are looking to tow a little bit more, a reason to get the CX-50 over CX-5, right? But in terms of fuel economy, overall speed didn't change versus the CX-5. In fact, the transmission also didn't change. The transmission is still a 6-speed transmission, which I used to think was among the best in the industry, but now with every other manufacturer's moving up to an 8-speed, a 9-speed, a 10-speed, and they have spent so much time tweaking them, a lot of them just feel more smooth and makes the car feel more alive, right? The 6-speed still does an okay job, but there are definitely times where you just wish there was 1 or 2 more gears. In a little bit, I'll test out 0 to 60. Right now, as I'm driving around, it still feels overall pretty good. Now, as for the rest of the cabin, it feels very cozy and very snug, like you're in a sports car. And some of you guys will like that, some of you guys won't. I talked about how when you get in, you kind of sit inside the seat. You kind of get held in, right? But it's very also noticeable that the door panels are very high up on purpose. So again, it kind of gives you that cozy feel, right? And on top of that, the center console is pretty wide, so you don't get a lot of room inside to move around. So again, some people will love this, some people won't, Mazda is kind of seen as the sporty Japanese brand, almost like the BMW of the Japanese manufacturers, right? And I definitely feel like that's the vibe I'm getting inside this cabin. Now, with that said, visibility all around isn't too bad. The front windshield is good. The rear visibility is good. Side, all good, you know, with the exception of door panels being a little bit higher. But the good thing is this is a compact SUV, so you're not sitting really high up. So I'm not afraid of, let's say, you know, small children on either side that I can't see. So that's good. You know, blind spot isn't bad too. Overall, visibility is good. I do feel like the headroom is a little bit less than some of the competition, but again, I think Mazda did that on purpose. Now, something else that's very different with the CX-5 versus its peers is the steering. The steering definitely feels different. Again, it's up to you if you like this or not. First of all, the steering wheel looks fantastic. It's a sporty look, but the steering wheel itself is very stiff. Like, there's not a whole lot of cushion. A lot of these modern steering wheels, there's a lot of cushion, so when you grab it, you know, there's a good squeeze feeling. With this, it's not. It's very stiff. You can't really get any input from it. So, again, you have to determine if you like that or not, but overall, I like the look of it. But besides the steering wheel, the steering feel itself is much, much harder, or I should say a lot more aggressive versus others in this class. It's not even comparison. So in terms of steering play, there's none. The input is fantastic. Any little wiggle in the steering wheel, you're gonna feel it with the car, almost like an EV car, as precise as that. However, when you're going at low speeds, you're making turns, you'll feel the weight of the steering. The weight of the steering, the stiffness is quite a lot, and I'm not so sure everyone's going to enjoy it. A lot of the modern SUVs these days, they have very comfortable, very soft steering. Even though they're precise, they could still be comfortable and soft. So it's like a two finger movement, basically. All you need is 2 fingers and you can move the steering wheel very easily. With this Mazda steering, you cannot do that. You need to actually really put some weight into it. So it is very aggressive. And I'm in normal mode right now. I'm in comfort mode. I'm not even in sport mode. I'll test in a little bit. So again, it depends on if you like that or not. If you want a sporty drive, the CX-50 feels way more sporty than all the other compact SUVs I've tested. But if you're looking for a very comfortable compact SUV, well, this definitely is not among the top. Something else that relates to the steering is the suspension. I definitely feel like the suspension with the CX-50 is tuned to be more aggressive and more sporty, in line with everything else I've said. I definitely feel more bumps and imperfections, more rattles. So I definitely feel a lot more of that. And in a little bit, I'll take this bigger bend more aggressively and see how it is, but I'm pretty sure that this CX-50 handles way better than any other compact SUV I've tested. All right, I'm in sport mode. I'm gonna test out acceleration real quick. So I just did 0 to 50, not 60. It wasn't the quickest off the line. I actually expected this CX-50 to be a little bit faster because of this really good turbo engine. But to be honest, it felt a little slow. It's quite interesting. Maybe because I'm starting to get used to all these EVs that I'm driving where you're getting instant torque right away, right? A lot of these SUVs that I've tested recently, you're getting like 300, 400 foot-pounds of torque at 0 RPM, right? So it could be because of that. But overall, I would say this is adequate, but you're not gonna feel like this is a very fast SUV. All right, so there's a pretty big curve right here, and I'm gonna take this a little bit more aggressively. I'm going about 60 right now. Very little body roll. Actually, it's pretty smooth. I'm being held in my seat. Yeah. Kind of like what I expected. The suspension is definitely more on the sports side on purpose, right? And with the very precise steering, you have a great combination. Great combination. Now, in terms of the cabin, I think overall it's pretty good. There are a few nitpicks that I want to point out. But first of all, looking at the overall dash design, center console design, the steering wheel, the gauge cluster, very in line with the rest of the Mazda lineup. And that's not a bad thing. It definitely has its own uniqueness. And there are some cues in here that looks pretty good. For example, the digital gauge cluster, right? It's not the whole thing, but it's kind of like the middle portion. And if you don't actually, tinker with it, it actually just looks like an analog gauge, but it's not, it's digital, right? So I actually do like the look of that. I like the look of the steering wheel as well. This very, very horizontal screen, it's over 10 inches, it's an optional screen. On the lower trims, you get an 8-inch screen. I think overall it's good, but it should be touch. It should be touch and also controllable with this analog stick or knob that they give you, right? But unfortunately, it's not. And because it's kind of indented a little far out, sometimes it's hard to see. But you get all the usual stuff that you want. The infotainment system is the same as the other Mazdas out there. And there are a lot of things you can configure, from your safety systems to your settings to climate control, all that stuff, right? You do have this knob with 4 buttons, so you kind of just have to get used to it. And once you do, navigation is pretty fast. The one nitpick I have with this is the volume knob is also here. You just kind of want to reach up to kind of turn the volume, right? But it's down here, so you have to get used to that. Other features you get inside this Turbo Premium I'm driving, you get a wireless charger, home link buttons, you get a giant panoramic sunroof on top. You get drive modes, you get off-road, sport, normal, right? The mirrors also fold inwards. I mean, you pretty much get most of the features that you hear about or want. Also, heads-up display. The one in Mazda is also pretty good, pretty colorful. It does tell you, of course, your speed limit, if you're going over, stop signs. If something's in your blind spot, it'll show up, right? So you pretty much get everything. Now, something else I want to nitpick at is the leather that's on the door panel and in this center console, and the stitching. This leather doesn't match the beautiful leather that you see on the seats. It's a different type of leather, and there's something about it that just doesn't look right. I mean, it just doesn't look nice. It's kind of like the leather you find in some leather boots, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it, or leather in older cars. It's a different type of leather. I wish they would have just matched it with the seats, because the leather on the seats look and feel beautiful. And also the stitching. The way they did the stitching, I know they did it on purpose. They crisscrossed pretty big, and to me, it just doesn't fit. It kind of takes away from the elegance of this SUV. So I do have to nitpick about that as well. And lastly, my final nitpick is this. Even though you do get a lot of stuff in here, it does feel a little dated versus the competition. I've reviewed a lot of the newer Hyundais and Kias, and they come with much bigger screens, more features, right? And the inside does seem more elegant than this. Mazda used to lead the way for the cabins. I remember when the CX-9 came out, man, the cabin inside looked absolutely amazing until the Telluride came out and kind of blew away that interior. It's the same thing. I remember the CX-5 came out. It had one of the most elegant cabins there is, but these days, not so much. And the same thing with the CX-50. It's good, but not industry leading anymore. Nowhere close to it. So that's another nitpick. As I'm coming to a stop, the brakes feel good, very normal, linear stopping, so that's good. Now, something else got added to this engine that I wish didn't get added is the engine auto start stop feature, which is the most annoying feature, but every manufacturer's adding it because it helps improve, fuel economy, right? And Mazda's before didn't have it with this engine, but they added it recently, and there's a button called I Stop, which is exactly that. And you have to, you know, press it every time to turn it off. And it's the most annoying thing. But unfortunately, everyone is doing it, including Mazda. So there's that as well. As for pricing, the CX-50 comes with 10 different trim levels and starts around $28,000, but tops out around $43,000. So there are a lot of trims to look at. The base starts at $28,000. Then you have the Select, Preferred, Preferred Plus, Premium, Premium Plus. Then you have the Turbo, Turbo Premium, Meridian, and finally the range topping is Turbo Premium Plus. So yeah, there's a lot of trim levels. Half of it is with the base engine, half of it is with the turbo engine. So first of all, decide whether or not you want the more powerful turbo engine, which I highly recommend. Then decide how much of the features and amenities that you really need. All right, so here are my final thoughts about this brand new CX-50. First of all, versus the CX-5. So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you are planning to tackle the outdoors more and you need to tow more, well, then it's no brainer. The CX-50 is better suited for those things. But if you're looking for more space, okay, that's where the CX-5 actually wins. The CX-5 actually has more space on the inside than the CX-50. And also in terms of looks, it's up to you. Looks are subjective. If you want something that looks more masculine, aggressive, I would say CX-50 wins. But the CX-5 also doesn't look that bad either. Still looks good in its own way. So again, if you're basing on looks, then you have to decide for yourself. Now, as for everything else, it's pretty comparable. The engine is comparable, the speed, the interior, the features that you get, everything else is very comparable. So if you're deciding to do a CX-5 and CX-50, well, there's just a few things. However, if you're comparing a CX-50 versus the competition, well, there's a lot to think about because there's a lot of compact SUVs out there. Some that has more features, some that are bigger and have more utility and more practical, right? But they're not as sporty as the CX-50. So do you want something that's very sporty versus something that's very big and comfortable? Only you can decide that. So that's why I'm kind of conflicted, because there are some things I really like about the CX-5 and there's some things I don't like. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle. All right, thanks for watching. Smash it a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for my future review videos. Take care. Bye-bye.